New microphone is not working, so we'll preach with this microphone. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. The Gospel of John begins with something small, not with something small and familiar, but with something expansive, creation itself. Before anything existed, there was the Word, and at the heart of that Word was love. But not love as sentiment, not love as something soft or fleeting. This is a love that creates, a love that sustains, a love that takes responsibility, a love that becomes care. This summer during my sabbatical, I'll spend time serving as a chaplain at Philmont Scout Ranch in northern New Mexico. It's a vast and beautiful place, mountains that seem to stretch endlessly, forests that breathe with their own quiet rhythm, streams that carve their way through rock and time. But Philmont didn't just happen. It exists because of love that became care, and care that became a gift. Wade Phillips and Genevieve Phillips came to love that land deeply. They purchased the property as a ranch in the early 1910s. They didn't simply own it, they attended to it. They lived with it. They allowed it to shape them. And out of that love came a decision not to consume it, not to divide it up for their heirs, but to preserve it and to share it. They gave away more than 127,000 acres so that generation after generation of young people could encounter something larger than themselves. And something happens in those encounters. The world gets bigger. Your perspective widens. The assumptions you didn't even know you were carrying begin to fall away. For many young people, Philmont is their first experience of true wilderness. Their first time of seeing a sky so full of stars it almost overwhelms. Their first realization that water doesn't come from a tap, but from a fragile system that must be protected. Their first understanding that the land is not just scenery, it is life. And that is where this becomes deeply theological. Because when John writes, all things came into being through him, he is not speaking in metaphor. He is telling the truth about reality. The land, the water, the wildlife, the ecosystems that sustain life, all of it comes from God. All of it is sustained by God. All of it matters to God. There's something the wilderness teaches, if you're willing to listen. It teaches that life is interconnected, that the health of the soil affects the plants affect the animals affect the balance of the whole. Water must be clean, air must be breathable, habitats must be protected. Because when one part suffers, the whole begins to suffer. And that truth doesn't only apply to remote wilderness, it applies just as much to working land, ranches, and farms where people depend on the health of the earth for their livelihood. It applies to cities, places like our own, where a river runs through it, where public lands and monuments surround us, where the balance between use and preservation is part of daily life. It applies everywhere, because there is no place that is outside of creation. Too often we've narrowed the meaning of love. We've made it about how we feel toward one another. And that matters. It matters deeply. But if love is the foundation of creation, then it cannot stop with human relationships. Love must extend to all that God has made, because care is the way love moves outward. If we fail to care for the land, if we neglect the water, if we exploit rather than steward, then it is not just the earth that suffers. All creation suffers, including us. Because human beings do not flourish apart from the systems that sustain life. We flourish when the land flourishes. We flourish when the water is clean. We flourish when ecosystems are healthy and balanced. This is what Wade Phillips and Genevieve Phillips seemed to understand intuitively, that what had been entrusted to them was not just for their benefit. It was part of something larger, and by preserving it, by sharing it, they allowed not just people, but the land itself to continue to flourish. John tells us, what has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. That life is not abstract. It is embodied. It is expressed in the world around us. And when we begin to see the world through that lens, through God's eyes, it changes everything. We no longer see land as something to use up. We see it as something to care for. We no longer see water as something to take for granted. We see it as something to protect. We no longer see creation as a backdrop to human life. We see it as a part of a sacred living system in which we are participants. And that changes how we live, changes how we use our resources, changes how we think about our impact. It changes how we understand stewardship, not as obligation, but as participation in God's ongoing care for the world. Because here's the deeper truth. Human beings flourish when we care for what we have been given and when we share it, not just with one another, but in ways that allow all creation to flourish. The light shines in the darkness, John says, and the darkness did not overcome it. That light shines in wild places. It shines in working lands. It shines in cities shaped by rivers and surrounded by sacred landscapes. It shines wherever people begin to see the world as God sees it. So perhaps Creation Care Sunday is not just about responsibility. Perhaps it is about vision, about learning to see that everything comes from God. And that love, when it is lived out fully, becomes care. Care for one another, care for the land, care for the water, care for all living things. Because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was love. And that love became care, and through that care, all things continue to live and move and have their being. And for this, we give thanks.